Hey, this is Ben Goldsmith, and you're listening to the Dysfunctional Nerdcast, you lucky freaks.
In honor of Aaron not being here, I give you the Functional Nerdcast. Welcome to episode 47. I'm Josh, the mellow, down-to-earth, easy-going, easy-to-talk to kind of guy here at DNC. And as you can guess, Aaron's not here for this episode. He ditched me on this one, but don't worry. He'll be back for the next one, episode 48. And we'll get back to the dysfunction that you guys are all used to from us. But, you know, at least I don't have to look at him this whole episode either, so that's kind of cool. He complains that it's not easy to look at me, but hey, it's not easy looking at him either for an hour or so. But he'll be back next time, like I said, and we'll pick it up from there. But all joking aside, I'm really excited about this episode and our special guest, Ben Goldsmith, writer for Source Point Press. We met Ben down at the Keystone Comic Con a couple weeks ago. And I was talking to him there, about his comic, Beyond the Demon, the Sea. Pretty cool book. And so we're talking about comics, rapping about all different sorts of stuff, shooting the shit, about concerts and whatnot. Pretty cool dude. So I asked if he'd be down to call in, do an episode, an interview, conversation, whatever. He's like, yeah, man, set it up. So did that and had a really good time talking to him. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Ben Goldsmith of Source Point Press. Hey, Ben, how you doing today?
Hello, Josh. Welcome to the Functional Nerdcast, because it's just you and me, and there's no dysfunction here. We are fully functioning.
We are. We will fully function, all cylinders, firing. So it's great to have you on.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I'm going to function all over this thing. I'm going to function so hard.
Do you have like extra socks around for that?
Yeah, dude. No, they're all on the doorknob.
Nice.
Yeah, no, we went blue immediately. For anyone who doesn't know Ben Goldsmith, there you go, guys. You just learned. But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. We met at Keystone, and it was rad. And I was not that I'm not so excited to have Josh, but I was curious about the dysfunction, because you guys were pretty. I hate to break it to everyone. They seemed like they were friends.
Well, we don't like to really let that out,
Yeah.
But we are friends. However, regular listeners of the show know that we don't agree on much when it comes down to the comics and everything. So,
Now, what's your hill that you die on? What's the one where the other two, or three, however many, you say you're all wrong. Objectively, this thing is terrible. What's your one?
Well, my thing is, I'm a Star Wars nut,
Okay.
So,
right.
And he just loves to harp. Aaron loves to harp on me on the Star Wars shit all the time, So
right.
I will fall on the Star Wars sword every single time, man.
That's a good, yeah. I think, well, luckily with that sword, you've got a nice army to back you up.
I do, and his thing is more or less the Marvel thing. I always harp on him for that. So, and I'm a DC comic fan, overall. So, we don't get too much into the whole DC versus Marvel crap because it's been done so many times. But,
right.
That's kind of like where we started, just not agreeing on anything, but we just love the comics, the toys, movies. We're both into horror.
That's I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I actually I have this pitch in with Softwood, Heavy Metal's new magazine.
Okay.
And I think if they use it, it'll be fine, or if they don't, it'll be fine either way, because whatever. I wrote the damn thing. Who cares? And it's this really funny bit where it's the animals of the different horror icons all sitting at a diner complaining. So like the Headless Horseman's horse and the mummy's cat that was in tune with him. And then my favorite, and this is probably one of my favorite jokes of all time that I've ever gotten out, was it was the clown from It, right?
Right.
Pennywise.
Yep.
He has a clownfish who's in this little bowl who's constantly swimming down against a red balloon that he's tied to, attempting to pull him up out of the water. So
keep on swimming, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like he plays on the like, I'll float down here, but he's a fish and a clownfish and the clown. I was like, oh God, this is if the rest of if I could retire right now, never writing another thing. That being on my tombstone, and I'd be thrilled.
Nice. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, man. Big horror fan over on this side. I mean, I don't think you can't grow up in Massachusetts without being kind of a spook nut.
Yeah, I guess you can't. Like the whole Salem witch trials and everything. Like
that, and then you like just all the Revolutionary War stuff, Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill. It's just there's so much. Although the Pilgrim, the plantation stuff,
right?
Like it's just so much.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there is. And I was kind of getting into that a little bit later. I have some things to talk to you about, like folklore and horror and everything. But first up,
cool.
first up, I kind of want to get our listeners to know a little bit about you. And so you're Ben Goldsmith. You write for Source Point Press, correct? And...
Yeah. Yep. So I write for Source Point Press. We got a couple books out with them. I have a book that is currently being released with Mad Cave Studios. And then just like a whole bunch of other stuff. It's been a really good year. I'll say that.
Awesome. So do you write specifically for Source Point, or do you branch out to other indie publishers?
Oh yeah, no. I branch out. Oh yeah. Like the Mad Cave thing. That was the big next step. And then I can't. These are the ones I definitely can't say because.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some good stuff, man. It's all good stuff. But Source Point definitely got me on the into the party,
right?
So to speak.
Okay, kind of put you on the indie map a little bit then.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm on the map. I would definitely say that I have a copy of the map. How's that?
All right. So you got like a little piece of the legend there in the corner, right? Yeah. Like,
right. Like the whatever border is on the map. I think that, like it might be like a sort of hieroglyphic image of me, sort of recognizable. That's only there for trimming.
Right on.
Yeah. So I'll take that. I'll take that for sure.
Sure. Yeah. So you do write for like different, publishers. Do they allow you to write? Is there any like no compete clause or something like that, or are you just like freelance and you can write for whoever you want?
No, I'm free. Yeah, I'm more or less freelance. The thing with Source Point Press is that we've sort of established this relationship, them and I, that I really try to go out of my way for them in a lot of ways. So just for instance, this year at New York Comic Con, I am not going to be going with them just because the space is so limited. And excuse me, did you hear that burp? Did I just burp on camera? Or on
the invisible camera?
On the invisible camera, yeah.
If we did, I'll try to accent it more so we actually do hear.
Please, I was gonna say, yeah, don't edit it out. Whatever you do, keep it. So like even just this year for New York Comic Con. I'm putting on the New York Comic Con after party for Source Point Press.
Okay.
Cool. And we're doing like a burlesque event with nerdlesque, and nerdlesque. Yeah, man. So it's like, and that's not something I'm not even technically going to the show, but that's something that I wanted to do. And from what I've heard from a lot of people, there are very few true relationships where you can trust people, and for better or for worse, I trust Travis McIntyre and Source Point Press. And I think they do the same for me. And that's to say is like any choices that I make with writing for other companies will only reflect better on anything that I've done with them. It's the one hand washes the other sort of scenario.
Right.
And as long as you keep, I guess a big thing that now, and you're in Philadelphia or New Jersey?
We're in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, just north of Philly.
Okay. So, it's like an East Coast thing, maybe more. And I'm probably gonna get crap for saying this even, but like, it's like an East Coast thing. There's a huge respect thing where it's like you get it all until you lose it, and then you have none.
Okay.
That's a very Boston thing to do, where it's like we will give you the shirt off our back, and continue to do so until it's not the case anymore, and so that I don't know, I've since day one, and this has been 3.5, 4 years now.
Okay.
With SourcePoint, like, they've always been honest with me, and I've been honest with them, and it's been great. So yeah, man.
Yeah, like,
I hope I fluffed their nuts enough. Now everyone's happy.
Well, if not, you could tickle them a little bit more later. How's that?
Sure, man. Definitely.
Now, like, what I see with, like, the independent publishers, I've talked to a couple at recent shows. We went to Garden State Comic Con a couple months ago. I talked to some people there, and like a lot of the independents, and I think it's really cool, is like, you're saying, like, everybody's like, washing each other's back, and it's, a lot of people don't see it as a competition, but more of like a community. You guys are so supportive of each other, and I think that's really cool, because I'm just really getting into the more independent, not even Zenoscope or the Image or anything like that. Like, I'm looking for like guys like you, and like these tables that are out there of like, I don't know what the fuck this book is, but it catches my eye, and I'm like, holy shit, this is pretty cool. Then I start talking to you guys, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. But it's so much more of a community and support thing, which is really cool. We lose track of that.
And certainly you hope that, then it catches your eye, and then there's consistency. And that's when the sort of chafe starts to separate between independent companies who persist and those who don't, because you'll see consistency. And SourcePoint Press has consistency, which has been great. So, because then it puts you in a position where I then don't have to constantly apologize for the things that SourcePoint Press has done. I don't have to sit here and justify to Josh, you right now, that like, sorry about A, B, C, and D. But to your point, man, yeah, absolutely. There is a support thing. I think it's mostly because everyone knows how hard it is, and I think once people start to see that you are putting in as much hard work as everybody else, knowing what little outcome there is, it becomes there's a brethren element, that, because it's kind of, there are no shortcuts. You can, I'm a big football fan. You can come out of college and be the number one guy and go immediately to the NFL and be the number one guy. And that just doesn't really happen in comic books.
No,
there's certainly like nepotism elements of certain things, but those are the outliers more than anything, and typically don't last.
So, are you a New England fan then?
So, what else is going on with you, man? Yeah, of course, yeah, definitely, obviously, but I'm a big fantasy football fan, so it comes down to this, like, if you and I talked for half an hour about football. We could never talk about the Pats, and you'd never know that I was a huge fan. But yeah, like as it stands right now, I'm not kidding. As it stands right now, I'm wearing Celtic shorts, a Patriots shirt, and a Boston Red Sox hat, because sometimes you gotta be a stereotype.
Well, I won't tell you that I'm a New York Giants fan then. So, shit, podcast over. No.
Yeah, it's the one. That's like, every time, because we do a lot of New York shows or a lot of tri-state shows and stuff like that, and it does come up eventually. But the one thing that I will always say is, like, any Giants fan has got me over a barrel. Like, I can't. I've got nothing to say.
It's all good. It's all good, man.
And all right, now let's talk about more relatable things. For
Sure.
Who don't know that I'm referring to the 2 Super Bowls that we were beaten by the Giants in.
I won't bring it up again. How's that?
I do. It is funny though. I think there are a lot of football fans in comics. It's not like it used to be, where it was this divide. Whereas, like, if you're a football fan, you don't like comics, and vice versa. I think, if anything, we've all started to. I think we all kind of caught on to this thing of, like, Oh, yeah.
It's cool.
It's like wrestling fans. Like a lot of comic book fans are wrestling fans too, because in the same vein, they're these Olympic gods that they're the superheroes that we can watch in real life.
Sure.
Crush each other. There's more similar than it is apart. And I think like once the stigma originally of, I think the stigma of like, oh, you can like comics, that stigma went away first, and then secondly, we were like, oh, we're in and we can like sports, and it's okay,
Yeah, sure. There's no stereotype anymore. I mean, there are, but like Aaron is, he's a sports nut, my co-host. So it's funny, and I'm not like the most active fit dude out there, and he works out and does everything like that. So that leads to our dysfunction too, and we always pick on each other for that. But, it is true. Like you see so many different people into the comics within, I think, in the last 15 years, really. Like it's not that, comic book nerd, it's you go to the stores, you're seeing a lot of different people of all walks of life. And
well, I guess the nice thing about that is it's bringing different stories.
Sure. Okay.
I think that's the ultimate winner, is the people who get to read the comics, because then, I mean, it's a far cry from anything I'm going to have done anytime soon, but I've been working on a graphic novel, like a full, like 200, 300 page graphic novel, about a football team that's sort of everything that you can imagine that football teams have done wrong morally and just rules wise, like all land on this one team. And then we have to watch this one team play the entire year for rookie salary, and the wins don't count. And it's like a little bit like The Replacements, but like more serious, and especially for true football fans. And this is the thing, like, and I want to do this as a graphic novel,
Wow.
And that's a part of and that's just my one thing, but that times like everyone who's now into comics and who's making them. So it's a good time, man. It really is a good time.
Yeah, it sure is. But what got you into comics? How old were you? Oh wow, there's this whole world out there of comic books and superheroes and shit like that. Like I remember when I got into it, and it was like a revelation in a way. So what was it for you?
Yeah, it was actually my buddy who in high school, I was really into guitar and playing music, and I thought that was going to be the thing. And my buddy Jay, and he would always introduce me to all these movies that were really cool, and kind of like Donnie Darko. He was the first person that ever had me watch Donnie Darko, and
okay.
And then all these bands, like he was the first person. He was like, "Oh, dude, you should probably listen to this band called Tool." And I was like, "Oh, all right, cool." And so all these different sort of counterculture things in 2002. And one of the things he had this bookshelf, and on the bookshelf was the original Ben Edlund Tick comics.
Okay. Yep.
And I had kind of watched the early Patrick Warburton TV show, and kind of watched the cartoons, but it didn't click until I saw, I think maybe I just needed to see, by that time I was a blossoming teenager and sort of getting resentful and angry and upset with the world, and seeing things as a little bit darker, and you appreciate a true good sarcasm and irony. And then I saw that in that, and there was just the silliness, and it was mixed with that. So that, once I kind of hit on that, it was just a long, slow incline to eventually having my own collectible comics and original artwork, and all the stuff that we definitely associate with being a comic fan. But yeah, it all started off with the Tick book, which I think is great, because then to really reinforce the New England stereotype, of course, it was a New England creator.
So did you stick with that kind of smaller title? Did you ever get into the, too mainstream DC Marvel?
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, of course. No, yeah, absolutely. Like I have a giant Batman tattoo. Yeah, of course. I mean, no question. And then, getting absolutely obsessed with reading everything. I mean, everything. To the point where it's like, I have my favorites, but it's always exciting to turn people on to one or two off-brand, Batman. So like even like just pure example, like James Robinson's run on Batman in the mid to late 2000s. There's some really great stuff there, and it's not really collected in a whole lot of stuff, but then like Frank Miller's Daredevil, I think that sort of cemented everything.
Right.
It was then reading that, and then it was nothing. I mean, I hate to say it, it's nothing super interesting or new. I think you look at like the best graphic novels, and then the sort of like the times 100 graphic novels or whatever, and then you look at like all the other stuff that's been around it, and I think sort of in a sense of consensus, we can all say like, oh yeah, no, those are the good ones. We read those, you'll be pretty good off.
Yeah, that's a good foundation for you and everything.
Right. So it's like there's nothing I can say that the hidden gems here and there, and people who are currently working in comics and things that they're doing that would be fun for people to read. But yeah, man, it's Frank Miller, Alan Moore. I tend to stay away from what some people would consider super classic. Like I like it, but I'm not like a huge like John Byrne or Chris Claremont fan. That I think that's a time period that I'm kind of cool with. That's not my the heart I wear on my sleeve.
Yeah, I hear you. See, I started in like, was it 86 with the Man of Steel reboot, and that, when I saw like that cover with the big S on the chest, it's classic, and I'm like, and I always loved Superman as a kid, but I wasn't into the comics, sort of movies, whatever. Superman 2, I'm dating myself, but I remember when it came out in the theater, and I was like, holy shit, like this movie was great back then,
I love it. It's always my favorite. I love hearing Kevin Smith talk about it, and like, because he still gets that kick out of "You'll Believe a Man Can Fly."
Yeah,
he's still like, and when he says it, still it's palpable. I like listen to if you haven't listened to Kevin Smith on any podcast where he talks about any of the Superman movies.
Oh yeah, and that's what's kind of funny about him too. Like cool about him is like how enamored he is with all that shit, and how much it means to him. To me, you look at him, he's like, wow, he's a real comic fan. He's a pop culture fan,
Yeah.
And he loves it all. Kind of, gets a little fanboyish, and he loves everything. I get it, but still cool. He's like a little kid. He really is.
Yeah, I mean, it
but I like
changes when you want to write these things and you want to get better individually. Yeah, you do have to sort of take away the sheen of the fanboy, because there'll be things like there was a Superman story, Superman for Tomorrow, the one that Azzarello did with Jim Lee, and I thought that I loved that one. I remember that always being like, oh, this is one of the best, and I just revisited it recently, like a couple months ago, for a podcast I do called Men of Steel, where my buddy Case, he talks about different parts of the Superman comics, and
that's
just
cool.
realized
I have to check that out.
Yeah, man, it's really good, and just realize what trash it was, like, and having to admit that. But it's the same thing as like if you want to work at Disney World, how trash gets taken out of the park. The magic's gone for you,
right.
And you do that because part of you wants to create that for someone else, and the other part of you loves the way that someone came up with a way that trash comes out of the park that no one sees, and it's magical. And I like how and why comics are magical, and so I don't mind knowing what's behind the curtain, so to speak.
Right. So all the magician's tricks then.
The ones that I know, ones that I know, but
sure.
And then the cool thing is then it's cool. It's like taking the things the one tricks that and then reinventing them in a way that's fresh for someone else.
Right.
So
in the process, like you talk about come up with new tricks and everything, like when you come up with an idea, what's your, don't give me too much of the magic here, but Like,
Yeah,
what is your approach? Like, do you just come up with the idea of, you know, the seance book, which I kicked myself in the ass for not picking up that day. And so
oh no,
I got to get them now. I'm totally intrigued by it. And I was reading up on it online and everything. I was like, fuck, I should have picked those up. Damn it. But I'll go to order them. So
yeah, that's okay, buddy. You know what? Order them when they're in Diamond previews and make me look like a rock star. That's what you do.
All right, man.
Which I think they'll be in. So I think it's September.
All right.
They solicit. No. So how do you come up with those stories? Like, so ultimately, it's there's a little bit of a magic thing that happens. Like, I'll hear about a story and it'll resonate, and I'll think of a interesting take on it. I think if you ever listen to like comedians talk, it's a lot of how they come up with jokes where they'll think of, like, they'll have a premise, but it's usually like there's like 90 or 100 other people who have already dealt with this premise or are currently good, but you're like, but do I have a fresh take on it? You know?
Yeah, that's the thing, is the fresh take, right?
Yeah, well, and but it's a little bit of like, is it just exciting? Because when you've read a lot of stuff, if you can come up with a concept and be like, oh, I'm excited by this. I actually like this. All right, so for instance, for example, I have this story that it's called, well, it doesn't have a called, but it's about backtrack. In the real world, I heard a story about this nursing home, reading it online, where cats go into the rooms of the dying patient just before they're about to die. So this is a true story. This is something that I read. And right off the bat, I'm like, the bells are ringing. There's something about this that I really dig. And then you start to put into place all those things that you learn as a writer when you go to school, or just through doing it, or through talking with people. And you go, okay, well, if I create an irony through the main character, he made his fortune by running nursing homes, and he's now in one of them. Okay, there's another bell ring, because that's cool. That's an interesting thing. And then what's even cooler is that you then take those two ideas and figure out a way to put them together. So he's in the nursing home and he's miserable because he was once a god. He was a king. He was rich. And now he's the irony of being in one of these places that made him a god, and is now, so you have that story. And then he notices that the cat is going to these rooms and then moments later coming out, and then the beep, and so then he notices this. Flatlines, yeah. So he notices this, and then all of a sudden, he's starting to piece this together. So you have, like, all right, you have kind of like a little mystery element with like a little bit of thriller, and potential magic, potential something more, and then you then really kick it into hard drive when the cat walks into his room one day, and then all of a sudden you've got a story, and you know what I mean? So it's like all these pieces that come together just because of one time I read a story that I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. And then you have to actually, like, it's so there's lots of, that's kind of how it all comes together. And then you find a specific voice to something, and then, and usually it's a lot of just copying shit, like the thing I told you earlier about the animals, like, it's totally copying, in a way, Quentin Tarantino in Pulp Fiction when they're all sitting around to open the movie in the diner.
Right.
And you sort of, like, you just admit it, you dive in, you go, okay, I'm doing this thing. But then through specificity, you will create your own thing. So yeah, man, I hope that answered your question. Like, sometimes go on a little bit.
Yeah, like I was trying to, like, get into your head a little bit. It did help to, hear. Like, it seems like your influences, you're influenced by, I picked up that Beyond the Deep in the Sea book, which I thought was really, really cool. I love that book.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you. And even with that, that's another case where it was literally like, we had the I refer to it, it's the gimmick, right? Like, what's the gimmick? And I mean that as lovingly as possible. I don't, no pejorative whatsoever. And the gimmick is that we have a book where the art is all tattoo art, because that was what I had. I had an artist who was willing to work, and he was a tattoo artist. So you then kind of reverse engineer it and say, okay, well, I have this. Okay, well, he does this type of tattoo art. It's original. It's like that classic American traditional Sailor Jerry. Well, then we should do a story on the sea, just like what a lot of that imagery evokes. And then you say, well, what was around during that time period? All right, well, it was Victorian style. That was Victorian era of horror. And Victorian era of horror did small, subtle, growing, immense immersion into the loss of sanity. That was like huge,
yeah.
Because especially at the time, they were dealing with so many brain diseases and diseases that were affecting the brain and having no clue what it was all about, very rudimentary science. So they were all terrified all the time of insanity and losing sanity. And so then you build the story, and then you have, then you actually, like I said, then the writer part of you comes in and says, like, this needs to be this way and this needs to be this way. And ultimately then you have a really, hopefully, refreshing and satisfying 22 pages of story.
Wow. You just like kind of answered like 5 of my questions all at once right in there. Damn it. Now the podcast's going to be short. No. Like what was really cool about that was like, I saw like a European American sea story, and which is obvious, but, and to meld it with that traditional American tattoo art was like crazy and awesome, and it worked so well. Like I said, that's the book that I was blowing by your table, and I was like, "Oh shit, what's this?" Like that, and I was like,
"Well,
this is
I do credit
different."
I do credit that a lot to the fact that we got Ben Templesmith to do the cover.
Yes,
that helps immensely. Turns out,
it is a great cover, but once you started talking to me about it, you're like, check out the inside, and I'm like, all right. And like ever since I read it, and I read it when I got home, I was like, how the hell did this come together? Like I would never have fucking thought of that. And I'm like, why hasn't this been done before? Yeah, man,
it was totally, it was a thing where we when we made it, we weren't thinking like, let's revolutionize the thing.
Did you have the art first in thought, or the story? Like how did those two come together specifically?
Yeah, so I talked to Davey, is the artist, and I talked to him for a while beforehand, and
that was Davey Broyles, right?
Broyles, yeah. And a huge part of it too is you have to let people, especially anyone who wants to be in on all of this, you have to give them a sense of the realistic expectations of what this life is. So once I kind of like painted him the true picture of what it is to be on the road and to do these things and all that as best I could, because I think we all have our breakdown moments throughout the process in the beginning stages before you truly know what's going on, and they're going to happen no matter what. But I was doing my best to alleviate as much of that for him by being as honest as I could as possible. And so we talked about that, so we get a good sense of each other beforehand, and and then once I knew that was the idea, I just did a ton of research into the stuff, and then wrote it all with like suggestions, on what to use for different things. Like here, with the storm, make sure that let's use, Poseidon is stabbing his trident at the hull, and a tiger is ripping through the sails coming from the clouds, because that's a way of telling the moment by leaning into the gimmick. So you come up with a gimmick, but you make sure that it's informing everything at the same time without letting everything ride on the gimmick. Like let it be a part of it. Let the salt air imbue itself in the sails. It's not just the water you're riding on. Like the salt air affects everything in the same way that the gimmick should affect everything that you do. It shouldn't just be the thing that gets people to the table. Like it should actually be part of the experience. So, that adding all that stuff in, and then having Davey be super game and willing to try some stuff. And that's a huge part of it too with the indie stuff, is like we weren't on a timetable, and there weren't editors down our throats being like, you can't do that. You know what I found out? Fun story. I found out that I was at the previews office. Previews, right?
The guys absolutely.
Yeah. So I was at the previews office, and I have friends there, and they were telling me, they're like, yeah, you realize that if it wasn't already with SourcePoint Press, we would not have distributed this book because the art style is untraditional. And so only later do I find out that it's, but it's like, it's that classic adage of better to ask forgiveness than permission. So we did it not really knowing any better, and just wanted to make something cool and different and something that we both believed in. And then we sort of by chance lucked into some cool stuff, and that's the benefit of the indie. It's also the deterrent, because you'll read something where you're like, ooh, this should have had an editor.
Yeah, we've seen those.
Yeah, where you're like, oh,
you missed that.
Oh, you tried. Yeah.
You kind of get an A-ish for effort,
A-ish, yeah, A-ish for effort. I love Billie Eilish, my favorite. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, dude. So that's it's kind of cool too. And it's funny because it's like, if you put together the amount of time I spent on the seance room versus the amount of time on this, it's like the seance room like outweighs this by light years. And I would never have thought, because it's done really well. I think we're like, yeah, dude. Like I think I sold like over 1,500 in like a couple months.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
And I think solely because of the fact that it is so different and tangibly so. You can immediately see like, oh, this is different.
Right.
And then it's really my job to make sure. And it's not perfect. It's really not. Every time someone comes back to me and is like, oh no, I understood it, I'm a little bit thrilled, because I would definitely change some stuff, but ultimately it succeeded more than it failed. So we were able to do something cool. Yeah, man, I'm glad you liked it. Thank you for saying that. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. And like I said, I could kick myself for not getting the seance, so I'm going to pick those up. So I'll order those properly. Yeah, just previews.
Just previews, man.
Yeah, no worries. Now, like switching gears to the seance, then I haven't read it, so don't spoil it for me. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. I know but can you just give the general concept? Because I think it's really cool, and to hear it from the writer's mouth would be better than me trying to half-ass it.
Yeah, for sure. Although I would love to hear that. It's one of my favorite things is to hear other, because we're at the table with like 7 or 8 other writers, depending on how big the setup is, and we all have heard each other's pitches so many times that most of us can do each other's pitches, but they're always like a little different, and it's always kind of funny to hear someone else doing
I forgot who was telling me about Beyond the Deep and the Sea. I don't think it was Davey. I think it was some other dude that was at the table, and he's like, I think I got it right. And you listen to it and you're like, yeah, you pretty much got it. It is cool that you guys are all like around the table. Yeah, I'll pitch yours, you pitch mine. And as long as you kind of got it right, sell me the book. No, it's all good. But, again, that's just a product of proximity more than anything else. I've heard the pitch. I've heard Greg Wright's pitch for Holliston more than I have certainly read it, that's for sure. Right. But so he, which by the way is a really good book, should read it. But so seance room. This guy Harry Weiss owns a mansion. Inside the mansion, there are 6 ghosts. This mansion's kind of beyond time, beyond space. It exists in its own thing, and each issue is what happens when someone ends up in the seance room, either by accident or intentionally, spins the spinner inside the seance room and releases one of the ghosts. Then a sort of Twilight Zone-esque tale, or Black Mirror-style tale, unfurls, and by the end of the issue, you find out everything there is to know. So the next issue, somebody else goes in, and a brand new story begins. Yeah, so it's like an anthology series. And you did it specifically because then, especially as a new writer, like I think people want to see, like, oh, you can actually tell a story in 22 pages. But then also, one of my biggest complaints about trying indie stuff is you pick up number 1 and number 2, and then you don't go to Comic Con next year, and then you go the year after that, and it's like, well, we sold out of number 3, but we do have number 4. Well, with Seance, it doesn't matter. You can read number 4 before 3, and it won't matter. Yeah, you don't need to know what happened in one for the other. No. You just pick up. It's a whole new story.
Right. I mean, I would definitely say number one is start there just because it lays the base. I mean, it's supposed to. But then after that, yeah, you can hop around. It truly, truly doesn't matter. By reading them all, you find out more about the ghosts. You find out about kind of their relationship to the owner of the house, all this kind of stuff. But again, it's all within the story, so it doesn't affect the experience, So because that was the other thing I tried to do. It's like, all right, well, why read 3 and 4 if I read 1 and 2? Well, hopefully you liked 1 and 2, but also because in 3 and 4 it explains a little bit deeper through just context clues,
right?
What happened to A, B, and C,
And you did a website too it's Vice Manor, right? So
yeah. Well, yeah. So like WEISS, but Vice is the proper
Vice.
German. Actually, so it's actually based on a Hungarian spelling.
Okay.
Which is when you pronounce it in the way it's Vice, which is I like that. Vice, VICE.
Wasn't Houdini's original name like Vice or
there
something?
There you go.
Right.
All right. Well, so I wasn't going to get into it, but you're right. That's why we did it. So
I love Harry Houdini. I love him.
Oh, well, buddy, dude, there you go. Yeah, so Heinrich Weiss was Harry Houdini's birth name.
Right.
So we named our character Harry Weiss to sort of mix the two together.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Very cool.
And actually the house itself is based off of the Magic Castle, which was one of Houdini's pet projects when he was alive, for the one in Los Angeles. So there's and all the covers, once you take a look at them again, all the covers are based off of classic magician posters from the 20s and 30s. So either Keller or Houdini.
Which is cool. That is really cool. Now it's getting cooler. Damn it! Now I'm more pissed off. Damn it!
Yeah.
Damn it! I shouldn't have spent my money on those Bronze Age. Damn it!
Oh well, dude, come on. I mean,
you gotta do what you
that's
gotta
hard.
do.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a hard decision. I've been there.
But that's really cool. So you go back into history then, and that was one of my questions I want to ask you. Is I see this definite horror influence, and we touched on it a little bit. You're a horror fan, but I see that traditional spooky thriller. That 30s 40s kind of vibe to it too. So when you're doing research and everything, are you looking at historical? Obviously you are with Houdini and some of these, the sea stories, but how much research are you putting in? And are these stories that you heard when you were younger and were like, that's a cool, folklore, urban legend, myth kind of thing. Let me elaborate on it and put my own spin on it. Is that where you're coming from at all? Or?
Well, each of them is different. So with the first one, it's I mean, by historical research you mean watched every episode of Twilight Zone? Yeah. I did my research, but that was something I did that
New Year's Day, right? New Year's Day, they always show the marathon.
Well, it's on and it's on Netflix now.
Yeah.
So it's even better. But so because with that one, it was the classic idea of if this is true, then what else, right? So I took a concept and pushed it to its furthest logical conclusion, and then through absurdity, can we find the truth? So that was the first issue. But then the second issue was a lot more akin to that sort of that cat thing I was telling you about earlier, which is that I had heard this not tradition, a thing that people do. They bury the ashes of their loved ones in potted plants or trees, or to let the ashes nurture and grow the tree. And so this is something again that is happening in our world. And then the bells ring and you go, well, what if this happened? And then you sort of have your story, So the other part about the seance room is that it was kind of actually a cheat, where to set up all that, the imagery in the place and all that kind of stuff like that, we do look into a lot of the classic magician stuff, as you're going to see. But in reality, the seance room thing is set up so I can do whatever I want to. It's totally a sandbox, man.
Right.
You have 6 ghosts. Each ghost has a different specialty, and the room itself transforms to whatever the ghosts want it to be. So, I mean, what I just said to you was I get to do literally whatever I want to. As long as I follow the rules, it's limitless, and that was the point. So that I could do, and then the third book that just came out is like a dissertation on rules and people who follow rules and what that truly is. And then the fourth one is totally different. Like, you know what I mean? So it's all
but it's all going to fit together. And
yeah, but it's a total cheat. Like I wish I was that cool guy who could say, well, I do 4 hours of research a night, and I haven't seen my loved ones in a year, and like, no, not really. I mean,
so you're not like a method writer.
no, not in that respect. I have not yet gone on a ship and had my legs cut off. Spoiler.
Well, that's a good thing.
So no, because then the book that I have with Mad Cave coming out, that's a female assassin. So it's like as far as for me as could possibly be. But at the end of the day, we're all people kind of just want the same things, really, honestly. Even the person you think is your absolute enemy truly just wants the same shit as you. And if you can kind of tap into those things moment by moment, situationally, and then dress them up in whatever fine clothing the editor and publisher have decided to give you, then you'll be fine.
Right. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you write like anything else besides comic books? Have you written like a book on its own, like, a real book in quotation marks?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what else do you get into and write as far as being a writer? And then to follow up with that, it's just going to be a total loaded question before I forget. Okay.
Okay. All right. I will remind you that it was loaded. I'll be like, okay, dude, this is like the tots loaded.
So, what else do you write, and when did you start writing? I wanted to ask you that earlier. I kind of got sidetracked, but like, how long have you been writing, and what different mediums have you progressed through and gone back to? How's that?
Yeah. That's a better question than I deserve. So I just finished a short novel. It's only about 100 pages or so. But that's all I needed. And it was, this will be my first technical novel. And it revolves around, doomsday cults and how they experience this, it's not a disease, but it actually looks like one on further. It's called cognitive dissonance. So that's what happens to these people once they experience the hypothesis of the end of the world, and it doesn't come true, and the sun still comes up and the birds still sing, and their brains do this thing that helps them to cope with such disparaging information, and it's called cognitive dissonance. And so it kind of got me to thinking about what that would be like for one person in a town where everyone believes in this thing and it doesn't happen, and sort of then taking it to extremes. But ultimately, that really, again, bells, right? Bing, bing, bing. And what's really stupid? Do you remember Cheech and Chong?
Dave's not here. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so actually, specifically that, I was a huge fan of Cheech and Chong. My dad and I were huge fans, and we, I thought of the phrase "Dave's not here, man," and then I was like, "Dave's God, Dave's not here," and then I got all like deep with it, and I was like, man, like humanity. Dave's not here, humanity. And then the editor was like, that's the stupidest fucking name I've ever heard. And I'm like, but Cheech and Chong. He's like, no, I get it. He's like, we're not doing it. So.
Meanwhile, there's how many Cheech and Chong fans out there going, that's a great idea, man.
I know. The disappointment immediately. But so, and I think I still kind of needled them with it, where I was like, when you have, I don't have kids, but I'm sure people have been through this, where you have a really good baby name that your partner does not like. So you'll occasionally still be like, just put it out there, to be like, just say it. It feels good on the tongue, right? And they're still like, no, it doesn't. We're not naming our kid Otis,
yeah.
So I just finished the first draft, and that's at the first stages of editing, but that'll be out pretty soon. And
Very cool.
yeah, this all comes back from just writing, told you the music, guitar, all that stuff, those songs, and being really into the way that people like Paul Simon wrote his songs with these.
He's a great songwriter, fantastic songwriter.
I mean, arguably probably the best of all time. You know, like
one of the best. Both, yeah, I will say that.
In terms of both consistency and quality, you know, it's because where the lyrics weren't doing things, the music was, and that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now. Like, that's a whole other level of greatness. But yeah, his lyrics, they were very specific, and the imagery was unique, but not obtuse. You know,
it's a good way of
Girl in New York City calls herself the human trampoline. So you're right away, you're like, I've never heard that sentence before in my life. Like, never. And then he goes on to explain it more and sort of like builds the world around it, even though he doesn't ever go like specifically, and here is why she calls it. You know, he builds the world around it, and then you're starting to get a sense, and he uses that specifically to build up the greater story of Graceland, you know. So Kathy, I said as I turned, though I knew she was sleeping, you know. So you've got this bus trip, you know, in America, the song, and you know, he says, Kathy, I said, even though I knew she was sleeping. So the first person perspective is like he takes an action that he deliberately knew was wrong, but is it like part of just a reflex, or was it a need to connect even though he knew he could? Like, it's so specific, and yet through its specificity, it opens up this endless amount of possibility to who he is as a person, what he is, as opposed to these dumb fucking lyrics that are like so nebulous and mean nothing, you know. And it's like, well, whatever people think it means, man. And it's like, no, fuck you. You didn't do any work.
We left it wide open for you to interpret, right? Something like that.
Yeah. And that's a whole other thing about art in general. But like, I for me, when I started writing with songs, trying to emulate those things, and being okay at it, being fine, in the same way that I'm okay and I'm fine at what I do now, and hopefully it'll just keep getting better and better. But all the principles sort of stay the same. So yeah, it actually started with songwriting, but trying to do it in a way that was all the shit that I'm doing now, creating bigger, invested worlds through specificity.
Wow. Okay. That's a good take. Interesting. I'm speechless on that. I'm speechless on that. I'm thinking on that one, but
did we load those? We loaded those thoughts.
Yeah.
All right, good.
So it is
chives.
Yeah, it is cool though that how you started off with songwriting and went through it from there. I suck at songwriting. I play guitar. I sucked at the lyrics. I'm like, someone else write this. I'll write the music, but I cannot write the fucking lyrics. Like, I write lyrics, it's just like 20 different thoughts written down. None of it makes sense, and I'm just like, it's garbage. So, that is definitely the tough thing, is because I think at a certain point, like, in the same way that I'll never, ever be an accountant, even if I train. No, even better. Let me take this back because it's more relatable. I will never be an artist. Never. And it's like, I can train and I could do all this stuff, but there's something in my brain that doesn't click in a certain way that goes like, oh yeah, absolutely. If I put the white shadowing here, the white shading here, it's going to really emphasize the space, and you're going to totally, when you step back but it's also going to play with this, and it's gonna, like, I'll never do that. It's beyond the realm of possibilities for me. And for some reason, I would say lucky enough to be able to do that with like words, but then the truth is that I don't have like a pension or a 401k, so how lucky is this really? You know, but it's fun and it's cool, and it makes me feel kind of rad when I go to conventions and I meet people like you and I get to talk about it later. You know, that's pretty baller. So who knows? Is this pretty much your day job then? Like, is this what you do? Like,
it's getting closer.
Awesome.
No, I still work. I work with children during the weekdays.
Very cool.
And read them horror stories. No, I don't. No, actually,
do you know who's watching your kids? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. This guy who has a Rocky Horror Picture tattoo. I actually had to like kind of give them all. I just got a Rocky Horror tattoo, and I gave them all preface. I was like, they have 10-year-old kids, and I was like, do I tell them what this is? And do we talk about this? And they're like, yeah, we're going to talk about it. But I respect the hell out of people who open communication. To say that, like, even though maybe this is not, I don't want you watching movies with guys in fishnet stockings. This thing exists, and here's why it exists.
Right.
I super respect for people like that.
Yeah. Communication is key for almost anything. That's what we're kind of lacking in some places, all over.
Yeah, I'm not. I could obviously be better about it as well, dude. Like, when you think about, especially the time we live in right now, no matter what side of things you fall on, you're going to fall against someone, and it's really hard, really, really, really hard. And I have not done a great job of it to branch, to reach out and create that communication with opposing sides. But there's also, you do come down to a certain point too, where you're like, are we these people? Is this who we are? Yeah. And you kind of have to at a certain point be like, stand your ground on some things, Mm-hmm. Because we just in Boston, they just had the whole straight pride parade thing, and
I read about that. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, and it's like, are we that people? Are we the people?
There are some people like that. How's that? But I like to think we're not that people. So
yeah. I hope it's I hope it's definitely the death throes where your body shakes the hardest as it's about to die, or like, the lion cat yowls the loudest in the woods as it feels its imminent death, but it'll.
So do you want to would you ever bring in like real world events into a comic or a book you're writing?
Read Seance from number 1.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about it.
All right.
We'll talk about it after that.
All right. Then I'll have to call you back after I read these, and we'll have to talk about it. Either record it or not. We'll see then. But
you're gonna straight up be like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
All right, awesome. There goes that question now. All good, man. That's cool.
Anyway, unfortunately, I think I got to end this kind of short because I got to run and take care of some stuff.
No worries.
But
man.
I do want to just say that every show that I do or podcast that I jump on or something like that is always a little bit different. And this one has been really top notch in terms of I think probably one of the most probing ones that I've done in terms of the content and how it's created. And I don't want you to think that this is a really rad conversation that we had that I don't get to have a lot with a lot of people, because you asked some really questions that led down that path, and I think it was a great one, man. I hope people dig this. I hope people get something out of this.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate the feedback, and it was a great time talking to you.
No feedback. Awesome. Wait, no. Here's I don't worry. The official card is coming in the mail with all the the full.
You have to give me all 5 stars, right? Otherwise, I get fired. So I tell you,
the question is this a Yelp situation or is it an Uber situation? Like, do I get reviewed back?
Yes, of course.
Oh, well then, yeah, 5 stars. Yeah, you're welcome.
Of course. No, this is a really cool conversation, Ben. This is great, man. I love getting more into your head and finding out about the books and everything. That was one of my main goals here, was to
super.
Just have a conversation about it. So awesome.
For all the people who listen to this who are curious, you can find me. Go to your comic shop, ask for anything Seance Room, Beyond the Demon of the Sea. Right now, RV9, that's the book that is currently, literally right this very second, in previews from Mad Cave Studios about the female assassin and sort of what it is to be loved in that world and to love in that world. And of course, I couldn't do just a normal assassin book. I was like, what if it mirrors the story of the Velveteen Rabbit? So,
killing me.
So for anyone who ever wanted to read an assassin story and mix it with early 19th century children's stories, well, there you go. it finally scratched that itch. Check out my next one about a alien killing muscle bound bodybuilder based off of Paddington Bear. It's a really wonderful, very heartfelt story. Anyway, so yeah, you can go do that. But then I'm also follow me on Instagram at MRBENAU, so Mr. Ben AU, and friend me on Facebook. Find me any of those places.
All right, cool. Yeah, and I'll put all that Instagram, Facebook information up on our page too, so everybody can find that again.
Amazing. What a functional podcast this is, I gotta say.
You know what? It is a little bit more relaxed without somebody here. Nah, but I miss you, Aaron. I miss you.
Should we argue about something in his honor?
Yeah. I mean, you got to go quick, but what do you want to argue about?
I don't like Star Wars.
You don't like Star Wars?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? The most number one pop culture, like, it's 40 years going. I don't care what kind of negativity has come out with that last movie, but it stayed for 40 years. And it's not going away.
Hey, Justin Bieber had more number one hits than Queen. All right, popularity does not denote quality. Ooh, you're welcome for that one.
Damn, that's a time to end this now, since I am the ruler of the podcast today. But oh, that's awesome. But thanks again for coming on, man. Totally appreciate
Josh, thank you, buddy.
And,
seriously.
We'll have to talk again, because I'm sure we could wrap again for another hour or so sometime.
You're the best. Thank you, dude.
Well, that was a fun interview for me to do, man. I had a blast talking to Ben. Funny dude, easygoing too, So it was really cool. Especially really enjoyed talking to him about his process, how he goes about thinking about things. I like getting inside creators' heads and learning a little bit of the secrets behind everything, but not everything. It's kind of cool. Really, really cool dude. Really good books. Suggest you pick them up. Talk to your local comic shop about getting them in there. Follow him on all the social media that he was talking about. I plan, to have him on again. Get Aaron in on the conversation. Figured, three of us can rap about a lot of stuff. Ben shares a lot of the same interests. Talk about horror. Maybe do a movie review or something, So, definitely going to keep in touch with Ben and see what he's up to in a couple months' time. So now I got to take care of our plugs. So first, you can always email us any time of the day at dysfunctionalnerdcast@gmail.com. Drop us a note. Say, hey, what's up? We're on Facebook, Instagram. Just search Dysfunctional Nerdcast. We pop up, of course, because we're the only ones. And YouTube videos. Aaron's toy reviews are up there live from the toy room. Well, live taped from the toy room. And the Twitterverse at the Nerdcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast directory so you never miss an episode of Dysfunctional Nerdcast. We bring you interviews, movie reviews, toy news. And I didn't get into news this time because, it's fun to talk about it with somebody else here. So next time we'll get into the news. And always, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you can. Helps us grow, bring you the interviews, bring you more episodes, all that cool stuff. So until next time. That's Aaron's thing. He can do it next time.